So let's see a few more things about arrays. So here we are going to talk about default values in an array. So when I say default value, so let's say what you have done is you have an array of size 100. So in this marks array, you have not assigned any value to any particular element. So you have not done marks I is equal to 23 or something like that. And let's say you try to print marks, what will you get? In this case, if it's an integer array and you try to print any element of this array, you will get 0. So the default value of an integer array is going to be 0 if you do not assign any value. Obviously, if you assign any value, that particular value will be there. Another thing is, let's say it's a boolean array. So in case of boolean array, by default the value will be false, and in case of an array of objects, by default it is going to be null. So these things might look like very small things for you, but when you go ahead and write code, many times what happens is that we forget to take input, or for that matter we forget to assign values, and these default values come in picture. So what happens is that the output that we are expecting and the output that we get becomes different. So that's why when you are getting a wrong answer, make sure that you have checked that your values are properly initialized, your array is properly initialized. Okay, let's just proceed further. So next thing is copying an array. So now generally what we did in case of variables were, if we have to do something like a is equal to 10 and we wanted b to have same value as a, we would simply do b equal to a. But what happens in case of array? So let's say we have a marks array and we have a numbers array. So marks has element 1 2 3. So let's say this is 1 2 3 in the memory. Now we have numbers, and what we do is that I want to assign values of marks in the numbers. So I simply do it just like we did it here, number equal to marks. So again what you will expect is that this was one array marks in the memory, and then there is another array numbers created in the memory. So these are two separate arrays. But what actually happens in this particular case is that when you do int number equal to marks, rather than creating a new copy of the array, numbers start pointing to the same array. So as you can see that there is just one copy which is marks, and number starts pointing to the same array, right? So this is how it goes. Rather than creating a new array, a separate copy, the same array is getting pointed to. And if you make in any of these arrays, so if you try to change marks 2 equal to let's say 13, and if you try to access numbers 2, you will get the value as 13. So both of them are pointing to the same array, which you didn't want. You wanted that marks is a separate array, numbers is a separate array. You wanted two different copies. So what you can do in that particular case is, there are two ways actually. Number one way is you just go ahead with this particular method of arrays.copyoff. So copyoff is a method that you can use to copy the value of marks in the numbers array. So here you are giving the name of the array, and here you are giving the length of the array. So what will happen is that now there will be two separate arrays in the memory, numbers and marks, each having the values required. So this is one way you can simply use this method. Or what you can do is you can create a new numbers array, and one by one you can copy the elements of marks in the elements of number. So one by one you can see that I'm running a loop from 0 to marks.length, and I'm putting the numbers from here to this particular array. So in this case obviously you have to take care of the size of the array. You have to know the size of the array from beforehand, that what is going to be the size of marks. In case you will get an exception. In case you don't do this, you will get an exception. So those are few things that can help you around when you're handling with arrays, or when you are working with arrays. So next thing that we are going to discuss is multidimensional arrays. So in multidimensional arrays we are going to talk about 2D arrays, because 1D array and 2D array are the most commonly used arrays. So let's just go ahead. Now let's talk about multidimensional arrays. So what we have seen till now is, let's say I have to store marks of one student, let's say 5 subjects, student of a marks in 5 subjects, or for that matter I want to store marks of 15 students in one subject. So in this case what we will have is, we'll have an array which will have 5 values in it, so each corresponding to one subject. In this case what we will have is, we'll have 15 elements. Let's say I'm storing marks of maths. will have 15 elements, each corresponding to marks of particular student S1, S2, S3. Now what happens if I want to store marks of 15 students in 5 subjects? So if you really try to think around, you can't just do that using one array. One array won't be sufficient in this particular case. We will have to have multiple arrays. So what you can do is, let's say we have one array for Hindi, one for English, one for maths. So for Hindi, I'll store, let's say first student gets 68, 79, 80. So this is for, let's say, for student 1. And I'm just saying that in all the arrays, I'm doing it roll number wise. So then first student gets its marks in the first cell, second gets in second cell, and similarly for all the subjects. So let's say the first student gets 68 in Hindi, 72 in English, and 69 in maths. Okay, similarly S2 gets its marks. So what is happening here is that we are having 3 different arrays, or in this case, let's say we have 5 subjects, then we'll have 5 different arrays. Okay, now let's say when there are multiple arrays, let's say there are 10 arrays, or let's say there are 20 subjects. In this case, you will have to maintain 20 arrays, or let's say the number of students is 200. So you can see that, you know, the pain of maintaining 20 arrays is going to be really a lot, right? So it's same like why we used arrays, because we had several variables, and you know, it was difficult for maintaining several variables. Similarly here, we'll have to maintain 20 different arrays. So what we can do is, maybe we can combine these 3 arrays. Let's see that further. So what you can see, what we did is that this was history, this was maths, this was science. I have combined all the 3 arrays. So it is forming something like a 2D structure, right? So you can see that this is forming a 2D structure. In this 2D structure, we have rows. So these are known as rows, and each of these are known as columns. So if you have to see that what is this complete row, this complete row is marks of history of all the students, this complete row is marks of maths, and this is of science, and this complete column 1, 2, 3 is marks of student 1 in subjects history, maths, and science. So what we have done is, rather than using different arrays, we have combined the arrays, and when we combine the arrays, we get a 2D array, and we also call this 2D array as matrix. So if you just have to see the relation, when we have several individual elements 1, 2, 3, 4, and we combine these individual elements, we get 1D array. And when we have several 1D arrays and we combine these 1D arrays, we get a 2D array, right? And we have even more dimensional, we have 3D arrays as well, but we will keep that discussion out for as of now, because as I said, most of the times we will be using 1D array or multidimensional array, we will be using 2D array. So multidimensional could be anything, right? It could be 2-dimensional, 3-dimensional, but we are focusing on 2D array. So now let's see how do we create a multidimensional array, or how do we create a 2D array. Okay, so as you can see that here we have 3 ways of creating a 2D array. This is the first way, this is the second, and this is the third. So what we have done here is that we have just defined the array here. We have not initialized it here. We have not given any value. So what we will do is, if you have to just define the array and not give any value, you just use 2 square brackets. As you can see, you use the data type first of all. So this is the data type that you are going to store in the array. Then we will have square brackets. So you have seen that in case of 1D array, we just had 1 square bracket because we had only 1 dimension, which is the length of the array. But here we have 2 dimension, we have rows, and we have columns, right? So this corresponds to row and this corresponds to column. So we will have, again I'm repeating, data type, brackets, name of the array, and then we'll have new, and then again data type, and then we have number of rows, that how many rows we have. So here we have 1, 2, 3, 4 number of rows, and we have 1, 2, 3, 4 number of columns. So let's say I add one more row here. Okay, that was a really bad line. So if I add one more row here, what do we get? The number of rows become 5, and let's say we add more columns. So in this case, the number of rows will increase, and let's say we add 100 columns, so we will have 100 columns. So depending upon how many rows or columns it has, we will put it here. So we'll have data type, square brackets, name of the array, new, data type, number of rows and number of columns. So this is how we are going to define an array. Now let's say I have to initialize and define the array at the same place. So what we can simply do is, we have this thing same as what we had here. Here what we can do is we can have the values. So again what you will see is that we have this as the opening and curly bracket, and then inside this we will have several 1D arrays. So if you can see that this is one 1D array, this is another array, this is another array, and this is another array. So again these arrays will combine to form a 2D array. So this is how we create a 2D array. Now let's say I have to access element in a 2D array. How we can do that? So now let's say again this is the marks array, and I have to access this particular element. So whenever you have to access the element, you have to first find out the row number and the column number. So if you have to find the row number, you know that this particular thing is in first row. In this case, the index starts from 0, just like in 1D array. The row index starts from 0 and the column index also starts from 0. Okay. So here we have this thing. So the index for this particular row is going to be 0, 1. Right? So if I have to write what is the row number or row index, this is 1. Now let's see what is the column index. So we'll start counting from the beginning. So we have 0, 1, 2. So this is column number 2. So whenever we have to see row number 1 and column number 2, this is going to be the element. Or for that matter, how do we know where is this particular element? It is at row number 1 and column number 2. So we have to use both of these information to get the value that is there at this particular place. So if the array is marks, we will use marks. We will give the row index in the bracket, and then we will give the column index in the bracket. So this is how we access each and every element in the array. So in this case, if we have to put the values here, we get marks, this is the row 1 and this is the column 2. So if you try to do something like system.out.println, or let's say sysout marks 1, 2, you will get the output as 11. Similarly, I just want you to see that let's say if I have to access this particular cell, how can I do that? So again, I'll call the number of, I'll see the row index. So if you have to see what is the row index, can you calculate? So we go from 0, 1. So the row index is 1. Now let's say I have to access this particular cell. So what do I need? I need to know that this cell is located at which particular row index and column index. So if you can see, my row index will be 0, 1 and 2. Okay. So row index is 2, and what is my column index? 0 and 1. So if I have to access this particular cell, I can do marks 2, 1. So now this is how we can access individual elements of the array. Now let's say I have to run a loop and I have to traverse through this 2D array. How we are going to do that? Let's see that. Now let's say I have to access each and every element of this array. Basically, I just want to traverse through this array. So for traversing, the agenda could be anything. Let's say I have to take input for all the elements of the array, or I have to output. So everything remains the same. So just like we take an input, we use scanner for, let's say for taking input as an integer, we use scanner and we take the input, right? Similarly here, for taking the input is just that we use the loop. We first take input for this cell and then this cell and then this cell. The agenda remains the same, that we have to take an integer input and put it here. So now let's say I have to go through all the elements of the array. What we can do? So in case of 1D array, we just had one loop because we had just one dimension, which was the length. But here we have two dimensions, row, column, right? So here we'll have to use a nested loop. So what I'll do is I'll first go through all the elements in this row and access all the elements in this row and then this row, right? So what we do is we run a loop from 0 to row. So here the number of rows are 4, the number of columns are also 4. So first I start from here. So as you can see, initially my I will be 0 and it's less than 4, right? So now for I equal to 0, what we do is that we go through each and every element. So we start with j equal to 0. So let's say here I'm just putting the values. So marks 0, 0 equals 0. I into j is 0. So this particular place will get the value as 0. So now what happens is that I remains 0. We go from 0 equal to j equal to 0 to j equal to 1. Now we are at marks 0, 1. We first put the row and then the column. So we have 0, 1 is, this is the 0th row and first column. So, and the value will become I into j, again this is 0 into 1 becomes 0. Similarly, we for j equal to 2 we come here, this becomes 0. For j equal to 3 we come here. Now what happens is that once our j becomes 4, this particular condition gets false and we come out of this loop, and now my I becomes 1. Now I am coming to this loop, or now I am coming to this row. Now I'll access all the elements of this row. We'll get the value here as 0, 1, 2 into 1, 2 and 3. So what I'm doing is I'm going to a row, going through all the elements of that row, then I'm coming to here, going through all the elements of that row, then I'll go here for I equal to 2, and then I'll go all the elements of this row. So this is how we access elements of a 2D array. And now let's say you have to just print the values here. So in this case everything remains the same. Rather than this particular statement, what we do is we simply do sysout marks I, j. And let's say what I have to do is I have to take input for all the elements of the array. So in that case what I'll do is I'll simply run a loop for I equal to 0, I less than row, I plus plus, for j equal to 0, j less than column, j plus plus, marks I, j equal to sc dot next int, and we close this. So just like if we have to take input in a variable, we do scanner sc equal to new scanner system.in. This you must have learned by now. And then we do a equal to sc dot next int. Alright. Similarly here we have marks ij working as a here, and as we keep on going, as we keep on going further, as the value of I and j keep on changing, let's say if initially my I is 0 and j is 0, and let's say I give input as 1, so this will go here, and when my j becomes 1, let's say I again give the input as 2, then this particular place gets the value as 2, and then let's say we give 3, and then we give 4, 5, 6. So each cell gets its own input. So that's how we take input in a 2D array. So that was about arrays and 2D arrays. Make sure you keep your basics clear and you keep on solving problems to have better idea about the arrays. Okay, all the very best.